The moment the rumors began circulating, they didn't sound like gossip, they sounded procedural. According to sources close to palace operations, Prince Harry's return to the UK wasn't planned as a symbolic visit or a sentimental walkabout. It was described as logistical, quiet, and already underway. No photographers, no advance press briefings, no emotional language. That alone set alarm bells ringing, because when royals move silently, it usually means decisions have already been made behind closed doors. What followed next only deepened the unease. Both Harry and Meghan went suddenly silent across all platforms. No Instagram posts, no statements, no leaks framed as friendly sources. Silence like that is rarely accidental. It's the kind of silence that happens when legal teams are advising restraint and when negotiations are already in progress. Behind the scenes, insiders claim meetings began almost immediately with senior staff linked directly to King Charles. Not reconciliation talks designed for public consumption, but tightly controlled discussions focused on terms, security, and structure. And security, more than anything else, appears to be the leverage point. According to multiple reports, Harry's public court appearance was delayed not because of scheduling conflicts, but because he allegedly refused to be seen until his security demands were addressed. In royal terms, security isn't just protection, it's recognition. It signals rank, relevance, and continued institutional value. To ask for elevated security is to ask to be treated as indispensable, not optional. Sources describe Harry's demands as excessive, far beyond what would be expected of a private citizen. That distinction matters. If this were a temporary stay, the posture would be different. Temporary visitors don't negotiate visibility and protection at that level. Permanent returns do. And that's why this plan, if confirmed, would represent more than a homecoming. It would mark a structural re-entry into the royal ecosystem, one that reshapes hierarchy and reopens old wounds that were never truly closed. What makes this even more volatile is the allegation that King Charles is not acting out of confusion or weakness, but calculation. Insiders suggest Charles understands the disruption Harry and Meghan bring and tolerates it for strategic reasons. William and Catherine represent stability, continuity, and growing public trust. Harry and Meghan represent chaos, unpredictability, and media fixation. Chaos draws attention upward, stability shifts attention forward. If true, that dynamic reframes Harry's return not as forgiveness, but as a move in a larger power balance within the monarchy itself. This would also explain why Prince William has reportedly sought independent crisis management support outside palace structures. Future kings do not hire crisis specialists unless they anticipate damage. That preparation suggests expectation, not paranoia. Whatever is coming, those closest to the crown appear to be bracing, not celebrating. And when institutions brace, it's because the ground beneath them is already shifting. The public context makes this situation combustible. Britain is not in a forgiving mood, and insiders are keenly aware of it. Households are facing rising costs, public services are stretched thin, and patience for perceived privilege is evaporating fast. Into that climate steps the possibility of Prince Harry returning permanently with full protection, formal status, and renewed visibility. To many, that wouldn't read as healing, it would read as provocation, especially when memories of funding controversies, charity finances, and unanswered questions remain unresolved in the public mind. According to claims circulating quietly, Harry's association with significant sums linked to high-profile initiatives still lingers as a sore point. Fair or not, perception matters. The image of a prince negotiating elite security while ordinary people are told to accept less is politically dangerous. Palace advisors understand this, which is why any return would need to be managed carefully, slowly, and with airtight justification. The problem is that leaks suggest the opposite approach: urgency, pressure, and leverage. That combination rarely calms a skeptical public. Behavioral history also weighs heavily. Former staff allegations have never truly faded, no matter how aggressively they were countered. Claims of intimidation, unreasonable demands, and a culture of fear continue to circulate in whispers, even if official channels dismiss them. Institutions remember patterns, staff remember experiences, and when someone is rumored to be coming back into proximity with power, those memories resurface immediately. That's why anxiety inside the system is reportedly high. It's not about personality clashes, it's about risk management. Another layer complicates everything: access. Insiders allege that during Meghan's early involvement with the royal family, boundaries were unusually porous. Private spaces, internal routines, and sensitive environments were reportedly opened with minimal resistance. Whether those claims are exaggerated or not, the perception of lax oversight has had a lasting effect. Modern institutions are obsessed with access control for a reason. History has taught them that reputations rarely collapse from public attacks alone. They collapse from internal exposure. This is where Harry's role becomes pivotal. Sources suggest he is seen not merely as a family member, but as a gateway. Emotional loyalty, legal standing, and royal blood combine into a unique form of leverage. If he returns permanently, that gateway reopens, and once open, it cannot be easily closed without consequence. That reality explains the defensive posture reportedly adopted by those aligned with the future of the monarchy. Silence once again becomes the loudest signal. No denials, no enthusiastic welcomes, no carefully staged appearances, just preparation. Preparation for backlash, for confusion, for narratives that won't be controlled by press offices alone. Because when the story finally breaks into the open, it won't be judged on intentions, it will be judged on timing, optics, and memory. And memory, in this case, is long. That anticipation fuels uncertainty, sharpens internal divisions, and ensures that every decision made now will echo loudly later, shaping reactions long before official explanations ever reach the public and defines trust for years to come afterward globally. What makes this moment especially volatile is that nothing exists in isolation anymore. Every move, every delay, every silence is interpreted against years of unresolved tension. Insiders suggest that even within palace corridors, opinions are fractured. Some see Harry's return as inevitable, a slow gravitational pull back to the institution that shaped him. Others view it as reopening a wound that never healed properly in the first place. Both camps agree on one thing: once the door opens, it will not be possible to pretend this is just a private family matter. There is also the question of narrative control, something the monarchy has historically relied on to survive crises. In the past, timelines were slower, media cycles shorter, and public memory easier to redirect. That environment no longer exists. If Harry returns permanently, the story will not be framed once and forgotten. It will be dissected daily, reframed weekly, and weaponized endlessly across platforms that thrive on outrage and suspicion. Palace strategists know this, which is why the idea of a quiet reintegration clashes so sharply with reality. Quiet no longer exists at that level of visibility. According to insiders, Prince William's posture is not driven by personal resentment, but by institutional preservation. He represents continuity, predictability, and restraint, qualities that stabilize public trust. Anything that threatens that image becomes a strategic concern rather than an emotional one. Hiring outside crisis professionals signals an expectation of turbulence, not reconciliation. It implies anticipation of leaks, conflicting narratives, and sudden escalations that internal teams may not be equipped to handle without bias. Meanwhile, King Charles's position is portrayed as more complex. Allegedly, he is balancing legacy, authority, and relevance in a monarchy that is constantly measured against public approval. Some claim he believes disruption can be managed, even used, to keep attention anchored on the present reign rather than the future one. Whether that calculation is accurate or dangerously optimistic remains an open question. What is clear is that this dynamic places Harry at the center of a much larger chessboard than sibling rivalry. Outside palace walls, skepticism continues to harden. Polling trends, public commentary, and media framing suggest that goodwill has been depleted. Forgiveness, if it comes, will be conditional and slow. Any perception of entitlement, secrecy, or preferential treatment risks igniting resentment that extends far beyond one family. This is why timing matters so much. A return during national strain amplifies every criticism, fair or unfair. Ultimately, the most unsettling aspect of these claims is not what is being said, but what is being prepared for. Institutions do not mobilize defenses without cause. They do not anticipate storms unless pressure is already building. If Harry's return were simple, the groundwork would look different. Instead, it resembles contingency planning, as if those involved expect consequences they cannot fully control. That expectation alone changes everything, because it signals that whatever comes next will test not just relationships, but the resilience of the monarchy itself, in ways that cannot be quietly reversed or easily explained away to the public afterward. And this is where the story reaches its most dangerous phase: perception hardening into belief. Once the public starts to believe that events are being hidden rather than handled, trust erodes fast. Not because of one headline, but because patterns begin to feel intentional. Secret arrivals, delayed appearances, security standoffs, silence from official channels. Each element alone could be dismissed. Together, they look coordinated, and coordination implies purpose. What makes Harry's situation uniquely explosive is that he is not just a royal figure, he is a symbol. To some, he represents betrayal. To others, vulnerability. To others still, a cautionary tale about privilege unchecked. If he returns permanently, every one of those interpretations will collide in real time. The monarchy will not be managing one narrative, but dozens, all competing, all amplified, all emotionally charged. There is no single statement that can contain that. Sources suggest this is precisely why there has been no clean denial, no firm confirmation, no clear roadmap. Ambiguity buys time. Time allows deals to be made, terms to be negotiated, and damage to be assessed before the public fully engages. But ambiguity also fuels speculation, and speculation fills gaps faster than facts ever could. Once people believe something is being managed behind their backs, they stop waiting for official explanations and start building their own. There is also the question of permanence versus presence. A visit can be framed as duty, obligation, or necessity. A permanent return cannot. Permanence implies reinstatement, even without titles or formal roles. It implies access, influence, and proximity to power. That is what alarms critics and unsettles insiders alike. Because even without explicit authority, proximity itself is power within institutions like the monarchy. If Harry is allowed to return with enhanced security, protected visibility, and quiet accommodation, it sets a precedent. It tells the public that lines can be crossed, bridges burned, and still rebuilt on favorable terms. For an institution built on continuity and consequence, that message is corrosive. It invites questions not just about Harry, but about accountability at the highest level. And then there is the emotional undercurrent no one wants to acknowledge publicly. Harry returning permanently would force unresolved grievances back into shared physical space. Distance has been the monarchy's pressure valve. Remove that distance, and every unresolved issue resurfaces. Trust, loyalty, betrayal, and control. Institutions can manage optics, but they cannot rewrite human dynamics behind closed doors. What happens next will likely not arrive as a single announcement. It will come in fragments, a sighting, a report, a quiet confirmation slipped into a larger story. That is how institutions soften impact. But once the fragments align, the picture will be unmistakable. At that point, the question will no longer be if Prince Harry has returned for good. It will be why this path was chosen, who approved it, and what the monarchy believed it stood to gain. Because returns like this are never just about coming home. They are about power, positioning, and control over the future narrative. And once that narrative escapes containment, it stops belonging to palaces and starts belonging to the public. And here's the part that makes insiders the most uneasy. Once the public senses that a narrative is being carefully staged, they stop reacting emotionally and start watching strategically. Sympathy fades. Curiosity sharpens. People begin to ask not what they're being told, but what they're not being told. And that shift is lethal for any institution that relies on mystique, tradition, and managed distance to survive. If Harry's return is confirmed, even indirectly, every past grievance will be relitigated in the public mind. The interviews, the documentaries, the books, the accusations, none of it will stay in the past. Instead, it will be replayed through a new lens, not of exile, but of return. And returns change the moral math. It's one thing to criticize from afar. It's another to criticize and then come back asking for protection, access, and legitimacy. This is why some royal observers believe the delay is intentional, not indecision, but calibration. The palace isn't asking, should Harry come back? They're asking, under what conditions can he come back without destabilizing everything? And that's a far harder question to answer, because conditions imply negotiation, and negotiation implies leverage. Harry's leverage is visibility, chaos, and the threat of continued exposure. The monarchy's leverage is tradition, public duty, and controlled access. Neither side holds all the cards, which is why this standoff feels frozen in time. What complicates matters further is the generational divide. Younger audiences are less forgiving of institutions they perceive as manipulative. Older audiences are less forgiving of individuals they perceive as disloyal. Harry sits uncomfortably in the middle, alienating both groups for different reasons. A permanent return risks satisfying neither. Instead, it could solidify him as a figure who belongs fully to neither camp, too royal to be ordinary, too disruptive to be trusted. And then there's Meghan's role in all of this, hovering just off stage but impossible to ignore. Any move Harry makes will be interpreted through her presence or absence, her silence or speech. If she appears, critics will frame it as influence. If she doesn't, they'll frame it as strategy. There is no neutral outcome. Every scenario feeds a narrative already primed to assume intent. The monarchy understands this, which is why the pacing feels almost deliberate to the point of paralysis. They are buying time not just to decide, but to let public outrage burn itself out, to let attention drift elsewhere. But attention doesn't drift when people believe something consequential is unfolding behind closed doors. It lingers, it sharpens, it waits. And that is the danger of this moment, not the return itself, but the prolonged uncertainty, because uncertainty invites imagination, and imagination is far more damaging than facts. When people fill in the blanks themselves, institutions lose control permanently. The story stops being about what happened and becomes about what feels true.
If Prince Harry does step forward soon, the reaction will not hinge on what he says. It will hinge on how long it took him to say it and what happened while everyone was being kept in the dark. Silence has already done its work. Expectations have hardened. Suspicions have taken root. At this stage, the monarchy isn't just managing a family issue, it's managing a credibility test. And credibility, once cracked, doesn't shatter loudly, it fractures quietly, piece by piece, until one day the structure looks intact, but everyone knows it's no longer solid. That is the real risk of a permanent return. Not scandal, not headlines, but the slow erosion of trust that no amount of ceremony can repair.